What's up, everybody? Well, it's day one of Authorcon. I'm about ready to go get checked in, and I don't know what to expect from this. I'm reading my Read Christopher Triana shirt. I'm definitely hoping to meet him tonight, so I'm gonna film some of this, but let's go see what Authorcon is all about. John Wayne.
What's up, man?
What's up, man? How you doing?
What's that?
How you doing?
Fuck yeah, I'm doing fucking good. Good to see you.
Yeah. So, I'm doing this for like a YouTube video.
Okay. What do you want me to do?
I just want to ask you one question.
Okay.
So, as an author, what made you decide to write horror?
I cut my teeth as a kid watching The Twilight Zone, Amazing Stories, The Outer Limits. That's what my horror is. It's that kind of stuff. So that's what inspired me. Like that's what I always tell people. Like those kind of anthology series where it was about that the whole time, the twists and turns. Like that's my bread and butter. That's what inspired me. Like that's why I write the things that I write.
Nice. Well, can I trouble you for a picture there?
No, yeah.
So, what's up?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just getting ready for the show.
Yeah.
Hoping to meet a lot of fun people today.
Well, I'm one of them. I'm Mike Pruitt.
Nice to meet you, DW.
And I actually run a YouTube channel, Mike Pruitt Movie and Book Reviews.
Oh, very cool.
So I want to ask you one question.
I'll do my best.
What inspired you to write horror?
Well, one of the things is like when you write, you're putting yourself inside another world, and it kind of makes you experience these emotions, these things as you're putting them down on paper, and it's like you're creating your own kind of exhilarating existence at the same time while you're putting those thoughts down on paper. And I think that's probably one of the biggest rewards to it, is you're putting that stuff down, and at the same time you're feeling it inside your head, and you're like, this is just fantastic, I gotta keep doing this. And it kind of turns into an addiction.
Nice. Well, I did read both of those.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I'll figure that out. There we go. Well, nice meeting you.
It was nice meeting you too.
You mind a picture? So, how you doing today?
Not bad. It's early. We're just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one question.
Okay.
Do you have any favorite horror recommendations that can be new for horror readers?
That's not my books. I'll give two of them. One is John Lynch's The Warrior Retreat, and he's just down the hall here.
I'm definitely going to see him.
Yes. And the other one is John Durgan's The Cursed Among Us.
Nice.
Definitely either one of those two, I think, would be some really good time.
So, want a picture?
Hey, there he is. So to see you again. I didn't mean to run away so quickly. I had to get everything set up.
Yeah, I'm here.
So yeah, everything I've done here is on the different press. This one might be. She did a lot of I did a lot of fun stuff, like stories.
Oh, Okay, now we can talk.
Hey, what's up, man?
What's up, man?
Not much.
I got a couple for you.
Yeah, I appreciate you representing with the shirt, buddy.
Yeah, I went on your website.
Appreciate it, man. I really do.
Yeah.
What's your name?
It's Mike Pruitt.
Mike? Okay. You want me to make these out to you or just sign them?
Yeah, you can make them out to me.
Okay.
I haven't read that one yet.
What's that?
I haven't read that one
Oh,
yet.
Boogeyman? It's a perfect time of year to read it. Yeah, it's my tribute to slashers, all the slasher films I grew up loving.
All right.
Appreciate it, man.
So I got one question for you.
All right.
Who is your favorite horror movie slasher?
Michael Myers.
Hey, that's me.
Yeah. I'm a little biased because he was my first slasher. You know, he was the first slasher movie I ever saw. Was Halloween. So it was kind of my introduction to slasher. So he's always going to be special to me, even though there's been more bad Halloween movies than good ones, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
I still love the early Halloween films, like the first four. I really loved. So.
Yeah. All right. Can I trouble you for a picture?
Let's do it.
Definitely
Man.
be an honor.
Absolutely.
So what's up?
What's up?
So I'm Mike Pruitt from Mike Pruitt Book and Movie Reviews.
Okay, great.
And I'm filming some of you guys and embarrassing you.
It's okay.
So my question to you, what inspired you to become an author?
Oh man, right. A whole lot of things, I guess. I grew up in the boom of like Stephen King and Ramsey Campbell and Clive Barker and all these guys. I read all their work. Read like a lot of R.L. Stine type stuff. Watched a lot of horror movies, even though my parents wouldn't let me watch anything rated R. I would try and sneak it in where I could. And I think over time I just decided that's what I want to do for a living is write horror.
All right. Well, mind if I grab a picture with you?
Hey, how are you doing?
What is up?
John, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. So, name's Mike Pruitt.
Okay. All right, I know you.
Yeah. We actually friended on Facebook.
Yeah.
So, I actually do run a YouTube channel.
Okay.
And it's under Mike Pruitt Book and Movie Reviews.
Okay.
And I have one question for you.
What's the question?
What inspired you to write military horror like The Warrior Retreat?
The reason I wrote it is because I didn't see a lot of books like it. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, and I got out, and I really like horror, but I didn't see a lot of military horror stuff. The stuff that I did see was kind of like the S Squad, things like that, where it's just kind of like a squad of military guys fighting like supernatural baddies. So I wanted to do something that was grounded in realism and was about the characters. That was the biggest influence for me to do that.
Nice. And I actually did read The Warrior Retreat,
Okay.
and I really
Thank
did
you.
enjoy it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, mind a picture?
Oh,
How's it going?
How is it going?
Say what?
I said, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Nice
So,
to meet you.
name's Mike Pruitt, and I run a YouTube channel called Mike Pruitt Book and Movie Reviews.
Okay.
I have one question for probably the both of you.
Okay.
So, what inspired you to write backwoods horror?
I'm from the backwoods, and I grew up around meth heads, thick forests, a lot of just deep rural surroundings. And I always wondered what it'd be like if you took country people with lots of guns and faced them up against inexplicable horrors. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, can I trouble you for a picture?
Sure, yeah.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
So, I run a YouTube channel, and it's under Mike Pruitt Book and Movie Reviews. I got one question. What made you write some sick stuff?
A combination of imagination and real life experience.
Hey, that's a pretty good answer.
That's the truth.
Yeah. I actually did discover you later, or earlier this year, I should say. And I read The Slob and Through the Eyes of Desperation over there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, The Slob was
Very unfortunate.
different. But I did dig Through the Eyes of Desperation, though.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, that one was fun. I got to write that, and it's there's two different perspectives for it. There's my version, the red version, and then there's Dan's version, the black version. So we tried something a little outside the box with that, but
Yeah.
we were happy with the result.
All right. Well, can I trouble you for a picture? What's up, gentlemen?
How you doing?
Doing all right. So, the name's Mike Pruitt, and I run a YouTube channel called Mike Pruitt Book and Movie Reviews.
Okay.
I'd like to ask both of you a question, and either one of y'all can ask or answer first. 5 favorite horror movies of all time.
He's got that in the bag for him.
All right, From Dusk Till Dawn's my favorite movie ever, but you got The Thing, City of the Living Dead,
As much as you talk to me about this, you should have this.
I know, right? Now I'm blanking. I would say The Wailing, the Korean film. The Wailing is really, really good, and
I can't give you suggestions because I'm going to use them.
yeah, I know. Let's do the original Nightmare on Elm Street.
Good choices.
So anyway, since he had to think about it, I'm going to go with The Blob, the remake of it. It Follows.
That's a good one.
Return of the Living Dead. What was it? Barbarian.
Yeah, that's another good one.
And Poltergeist.
Nice.
The original, not the remake. So that's what I'm going to go with. No thoughts.
Okay.
Later this month, October 22nd to be exact. It's called Shadows from the Basement. That I have a Facebook group called Bauer's Basement of Humanity, and my Patreon is called Jay's Cellar Dwellers. So I just stuck with the whole basement theme, and that's where Shadows from the Basement came from. So it's a new short story collection coming out later on. I'm going to read from one of the stories called. I'll go from Dust to Dust, and then I don't know if you want to cut it at 10 minutes or so, or because this will probably take me longer than 10 minutes to read it all. But I'm going to read through from the story. It hasn't been published anywhere yet before. Some of these have been previously published. This one is not. So, From Dust to Dust, 1. Helen Cartwright dug her toes into the thick mud. It squished between them as she wiggled them farther into the muck. Her older sister, Maggie, sat next to her doing the same. Her parents were out in the lake with her 3 younger brothers, laughing and splashing. The sun beat down on them, blistering Helen's skin. She didn't mind. The sun felt glorious. What do you think this house is going to be like? Helen asked. Mama said it was beautiful, and that we would all have our own rooms, Maggie said. Maybe we won't have to be gone for too long, though. I hope it's as good as Mama says. I didn't want to leave Kansas, Helen said, scrunching her toes and watching the mud squeeze through them. Maggie sighed and leaned on her younger sister. At 11 and 10, Maggie and Helen were the closest in age among the 5 siblings, which meant they were often found playing together while leaving the others out. Besides, as the only girls, they had a lot more in common than their brothers. Helen had doubts about moving to Appleton, Wisconsin. Growing up in the grasslands outside of Ulysses, Kansas, all she had ever known was the farm. She loved it there. Goats, chickens, the barn cats were her favorite. Life was tough, but she enjoyed getting her hands in the dirt. But the last few years, it had grown so dusty and scary. It got so bad that Daddy said they had to move. Maggie said it was because he lost the deed to the farm. Robert, her 9-year-old brother, said it was because the dust made the farm die. It didn't matter why. To Helen, they should have stayed put. God wouldn't punish them forever. Eventually, he would make the dust stop. Are you two going to play in the mud all day or come in the water? Their mother asked. Beatrice Cartwright, who preferred to go by B, was a beautiful woman with curly auburn hair and dimples on her rosy cheeks. Maggie didn't think a more perfect woman existed. Fay Ray was pretty, but Mama was something more. Not right now, Mama, Helen said. I don't want fish nibbling on my toes, Maggie added. Charlie, their 7-year-old brother, held their youngest sibling, 3-year-old Henry, in his arms, bobbing up and down, making the younger boy shout and laugh. When Henry heard Maggie say something about the fish nibbling her toes, he changed his mind about the joy of splashing in the lake and turned from laughter to fear. He cried for Charlie to take him out, patting his head and pointing toward the sisters. Maggie, their mother said, you see what you've done to little Henry? Their father, Richard Cartwright, scowled at them, then turned to Henry. Those fishes won't do nothing to you. Those piggies are safe. Maggie, apologize to your brother. Maggie sighed, but didn't dare defy Daddy. I'm sorry, Henry. Those fish won't hurt you. They only like the toes of little girls. You're not in any danger. Henry looked at Charlie, then back at their mother. She's right, Bee said. You have nothing to worry about. Henry stopped fidgeting, and just like that, the mirth returned. The 2 girls earned a stern look from their father, but he didn't say anything else. Helen wasn't looking forward to the 10-mile walk the family still had until they reached the house, but once there, they wouldn't have to leave. She leaned back and enjoyed the warm sunshine, closing her eyes and daydreaming about fields of daisies. 2. Helen's heart thumped in her chest. A small flickering flame illuminated the front of the house. The stars and full moon overhead gave them enough light to see, but standing outside their new home in the middle of the night brought a sense of relief and a hint of trepidation. The house was much larger than she expected. Her father must have had the same thoughts as he whistled loudly. Would you look at that, he said. Can you believe that we get to live here? Their mom sidled up next to him, placing her hand in his. Henry was asleep and draped over her shoulder, but she never complained about the extra weight. It's lovely, she whispered. Does this mean I get my own room? Little brother Robert asked. Me too? Her other brother Charlie asked. All of you can have your very own bedroom, their daddy said. Come, let's see if Mr. Argyle is there. Helen heard the name before. When her father proposed they leave Kansas for Wisconsin, he told the family about Mr. Argyle, an old friend of his late father. He was a veteran of the Great War and fought in the Rhineland. She heard rumors trouble was stirring there again, and the German chancellor, a man by the name of Adolf Hitler, was causing problems. She cared little for events on the other side of the world. What she cared about was what Mr. Argyle was doing for them. Let's get inside before the bugs eat us alive, her father said. Helen wasn't sure how late it was. Her father once had a watch, but sold it on their northern journey so they could eat. If this Mr. Argyle was up, he must be a night owl. They followed her daddy as he climbed the stone steps. He turned back to them, straightened his shirt, then knocked on the door. In the quiet night, his knuckles on the solid wood sounded like he could wake the dead. Helen's heart pounded harder in her chest. What if they were at the wrong house? What if this Mr. Argyle was a bad person? Someone shuffled inside. Helen, Robert, and Charlie all huddled closer to Maggie. The deadbolt slid free and the door creaked open. Hello? The man asked. He was tall and lean, with a hauntingly gaunt face. Thin strands of black hair were plastered on his pale forehead. Thin red lips covered crooked teeth. Helen thought she was looking at Nosferatu. She blinked her eyes and grabbed Maggie's arm, pulling herself closer. Mr. Argyle? Her father asked. Indeed I am. Are you Mr. Cartwright? Yes, sir, her daddy said, and my family. I see. Please, come in. I was expecting you days ago and thought you might have reconsidered the offer. He held the door open and gently waved them in. No, sir. Travel took a bit longer than expected. We took the train as far as we could and have been on foot since. Mr. Argyle raised an eyebrow. Is that so? You'll be pleased to know we have a Model T available to you, assuming you know how to drive. Well, of course, sir. Thank you kindly. Please, come into the parlor and we can discuss our arrangement. I know it's late, but it's best if we settle things now. Helen gawked at a large grandfather clock ticking diligently at the end of the hall. It was 10:35, much later than her normal bedtime. They followed Mr. Argyle into the parlor, a room at the front of the house decorated with rich, dark mahogany wood and a deep red velvet wallpaper with a Greek motif pattern. A large plush couch, dark brown like the surrounding wood, lined the wall close to the door. A flickering candle sat atop a small table in the front window. Children, don't touch anything, the mother said. Be very careful. I assure you, Mr. Cartwright, the children are more than welcome in here, Mr. Argyle said. Please, just call me Bee, she replied. Mr. Argyle nodded in understanding, then crossed the room, turning around to address the assembled Cartwrights. It has been my greatest pleasure to offer you this opportunity to watch over Argyle Manor while I'm on my travels. Your father, he said to their daddy, saved my life during the war. It is fitting that I return the favor. Not to sound disrespectful, but how did you know about our predicament, her daddy asked. Helen perked up. She had no idea how her daddy was connected with this man and assumed he knew about him before they were offered the opportunity to live there. And I'll stop there.
So this is out of my new collection, Graveside Lullabies, and this one was written for an online Halloween event a couple years ago. It's called Light One for Me. Gwen kicked the beer can off the sidewalk, watched it bounce in the gutter. Dust swirled around her ankles in the cooling night while the echo from the can faded into the silence. The tattered witch costume Gwen wore couldn't keep the chill from reaching her bones, no matter how tightly she pulled the thin material around herself. Gwen shivered again, looking at the houses lining the street in the quickening darkness. The full moon rose, chasing the sun from the sky, and a few dark clouds dotted the horizon along with the stars. And Gwen increased her pace. Being out at night, especially on Halloween, was never enough time for Gwen to live a little. Candles flickered in one house as Gwen stopped to check the plastic skeletons hanging from a dead tree on the other side of the broken wooden fence. Gwen ran her fingers over the peeling, weather-worn white paint, and she imagined the sharp edges biting into her flesh, and she yanked her hand away. Stupid fence, Gwen huffed. She was about to continue home when movement in the front window caught her eye. At first, she thought the wind howling through the yard caused the tattered curtains to sway, but in the candlelight, Gwen swore someone moved. For the past few years, she hadn't noticed anyone lurking around the house, which lulled her into a false sense of security about its safety. Gwen's mother warned her before she died to beware of the world outside of their home. Her mother's warning still haunted her, and Gwen wished she'd listened more closely to her mother. The atmosphere surrounding Gwen made Halloween unique, and she yearned to feel the bonds of the living world weaken, so the dead, like her, could make their presence felt again. Gwen missed going door to door for candy, but she also didn't miss the pain she experienced in life. The pain she had being dead didn't feel any better, however. Children laughed across the street as they ran from the house decorated like a pumpkin patch. The kids stopped on the sidewalk and compared their newest candy haul before bounding to the next dwelling on the block. Gwen longingly wanted to join them, but knew it could never be like that again. Her eyes returned to the quiet house, and her gaze lingered on a single jack-o'-lantern glowing on the porch. It grinned at her, and someone stared at her behind the door. At first, Gwen didn't think the person could see her, but a hand waved from behind the curtains. Gwen slowly raised her hand and timidly returned the gesture with a wave of her own. The curtains fluttered and the window's candle went out. Gwen tried to move on and enjoy her night on the living side of the veil, but her feet denied her desire to keep walking. Before she made the turn to leave, the door latch clicked and creaked open. A young boy peered around the heavy wooden door and stared at Gwen with his mouth agape. Gwen slowly waved again at the frightened-looking boy. His shaggy blonde hair hung over his eyes, and dirt smudges colored his chubby cheeks. The boy looked like what Gwen had imagined an angel would appear to be. He moved his fingers up and down as he smiled, and his face lit up and made Gwen smile brighter. "Do you like my jack-o'-lantern?" the boy asked. "My name is Gwen, and yes, I do like your jack-o'-lantern," she answered. She pointed to the large grinning pumpkin on the porch and laughed. The boy pulled back shyly. Gwen could see his cheeks turning red even in the fading light. "Wait, don't go. I'm sorry," Gwen pleaded with the boy. "And what's your name?" "Timmy," he replied. "Did you carve that pumpkin yourself?" Timmy knelt on the porch and ran his fingers over the pumpkin's eyes and mouth. The candle inside flickered, and Timmy motioned for Gwen to enter the yard. Gwen reluctantly reached for the gate. Her hand grabbed the splintered wood and opened the portal to another world. The yard felt foreign to Gwen. She'd been in the Vale for longer than she could remember, and she struggled to grasp the memories swirling in her mind. Gwen didn't breathe, but pretended to hold her breath as she stepped over the gate's threshold into the yard. "Where do you live, Gwen?" Timmy asked. "Oh, I live over on Green Street, out past the church." "Well, the only thing out there is the graveyard," Timmy said. His voice wavered. Gwen heard the fear creep into Timmy's speech. She didn't like the idea of him being afraid of her, and she didn't want to scare or hurt him. "Oh, I won't hurt you," Gwen said. She flashed a shy smile and reached out for Timmy's hand. "I don't think you could hurt me any more than my daddy," Timmy sighed. He took Gwen's hand and squeezed it. "You feel cold," he said. Gwen pulled her hand back and turned her head. "Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. My mom said I shouldn't talk to people I don't know." "Well, my mama tries to keep me inside the house. When my daddy isn't home, she doesn't want me talking to other people." Gwen felt the sadness rolling off the boy like waves on the beach. Each one hit her, threatening to pull her down into his depths. "Did you carve the jack-o'-lantern yourself?" Gwen asked, pointing to the grinning pumpkin on the porch. "I did him all by myself," Timmy boasted, his chest puffed out proudly, his face beaming in pride. "I like him very much. The pumpkin reminds me when me and my mom would carve jack-o'-lanterns for Halloween," Gwen said. "Mom and Dad won't help me. I have to do them all myself. I always have to steal the pumpkins from Mr. Wade's farm," Timmy explained. Gwen cocked her head to the side and studied the crooked smile and large triangle eyes carefully. "He is outstanding." "Thanks." "You don't get told nice things very often, do you?" Gwen asked. Timmy stood silently and squeezed Gwen's hand lightly. "No," Timmy said. His head lowered and his eyes stared at the ground. "Timmy, will you light a candle for me and a pumpkin every Halloween?" Gwen asked. Timmy's head perked up and he finally smiled again. "I can do that for you," he said, and bounded back up the porch into the house. After a few moments, he returned and knelt beside the jack-o'-lantern on the top step. He carefully removed the lid from the pumpkin's top and blew out the candle inside. The bright jack-o'-lantern dimmed and darkened. Smoke spilled out from the mouth and the eyes, while Timmy struck a match and gently touched it back to the wick. A new flame sprang to life, and the pumpkin's face beamed its bright light again. "Is that better?" Timmy called out from the porch. "Yes, thank you, Timmy. I hope you'll light one for me every year. I'll be back to check every Halloween," Gwen called back. Something crashed in the house, and Timmy flinched. "Timmy, get your ass back in this house now!" a voice boomed from inside. "Yes, Dad," Timmy answered. He turned back and gave Gwen a quick wave before disappearing into the house. This time, the lights behind the curtains went dark, and Gwen thought she heard Timmy crying. Gwen knew nobody else could see her, so she sat on the sidewalk until sunrise. She had to know that Timmy would be okay. Once she heard nothing, she stood up and returned to her resting place beyond the veil. Gwen hoped Timmy would keep his promise to her. Gwen returned to Timmy's house for the next 3 years and saw the pumpkin smiling brightly at her. Timmy didn't come outside anymore, but she could see him stalking behind the curtains of the upstairs window, making sure she'd stop by to see the lights from her. It wasn't until the 4th year when Gwen returned on Halloween that a jack-o'-lantern wasn't on the porch when she arrived. Boards covered the windows and nothing moved around the house. The old peeling paint Gwen remembered appeared to be even worse. "Sorry, Gwen," a voice said behind her. Gwen turned to see Timmy smiling behind her. Although he looked older than her now, he still had his big smile. "Timmy?" Gwen asked. Fear crept into her thoughts and she wanted to run off and cry. "I'm sorry I didn't get to light one for you this year," Timmy apologized. "It's okay, but it's nice to have someone remember me on Halloween," Gwen said, taking Timmy's hand. "Did it hurt?" "Yeah, it hurt a lot," Timmy softly replied. "I thought they loved me." Gwen reached out to Timmy and wiped a tear from his cheek. "How can you do that?" Timmy asked. "It's the night when the veil and the living world share thin boundaries. It's why we can walk around like living kids again on Halloween," Gwen explained. "Do I have to go with you?" "I don't know if I'm ready," Timmy said. "It comes for all of us eventually. I've been waiting for what happened to you to happen. My job is to comfort you at the end of your journey. But you're my age." "Timmy, I visited you every Halloween for years, knowing each one could have been your last," Gwen said. "Why did he do it?" "Some people can't help themselves in the rages of being human. Our flesh is weak, but our souls are beautiful things. Now you can rest without fear or pain. And we can come back every Halloween to be kids again," Gwen said. "Will someone light one for us, Gwen?" Timmy asked. "Hopefully someone will light a jack-o'-lantern in memory of us," Gwen replied. Together, Gwen and Timmy left the pain of living behind. Gwen did her duty and led Timmy into the veil, hoping someone would ignite memories playing for them on Halloween each year.
Novel last year, second one came out this year. I have two choices, first book, second book. I'm going to read you something from the first book. It's not the first chapter, it's actually the beginning of the second chapter, and it's a paranormal thriller. It's set in St. Louis, and the protagonist, first-person protagonist, has just run into an old friend of his from high school. They've kind of, down their luck. But they went out to dinner and his friend's gotten sick, and so our hero, D, is taking his friend back to his apartment. That's where we begin. The rain had returned with something approaching enthusiasm, and I zipped up my jacket before asking Colton which way to go. He gestured resignedly to the left, and I guided him to the entrance of 1500 Locust, double glass doors and a classical white stone portico, surmounted by terracotta ocean waves and what looked like a pair of mermaids. A strong scent of pine wafted over us as we passed through the doors into a small, brightly lit lobby. Still-fronted mailboxes lined the wall to our right, while an unoccupied security desk supported a monitor, keyboard, and mouse ahead of us. Colton stopped and frowned at the desk. "Where's Rashad?" he asked. "Who's Rashad?" "Building security. Does the night shift." "Maybe he stepped out for a piss. You don't need him to get into your apartment, do you?" "Don't want to go to my apartment," Colton whined and took a step backward. I sighed. "Dude, you just lost your dinner, and I don't think you need to be going anywhere else tonight. Come on, I'll go up with you and check it out if you want." "Would you?" "Thanks, D." "Sure." And I'll punch myself in the nuts later, too. Colton waved a key card over a reader next to a big white button which lit up and allowed him to summon the elevator. According to the red LED display over the doors, it had been hanging out on the 3rd floor, and a mechanical droning emanating from the other side of the doors as it descended didn't thrill me. The elevator cabin itself was small, but bright and reassuringly clean. Colton flashed his keycard at the panel and punched 3. "I'm not in the penthouse, I'm afraid," he said with a weak smile. I returned it, but as soon as the elevator rose, what little good humor I still had evaporated. The skin on my arms prickled as the temperature dropped, and my breath caught as the air thinned. I grew aware of I've always had trouble describing this, not that I've often tried with anyone other than myself. If I said presence, you'd think I was talking about ghosts, and I'm not sure I believe in ghosts, not real ones, not really. But something was there, something I couldn't explain, something I had felt before. I hadn't liked it then, I didn't like it now. You okay, Dee? Yeah, I muttered, fighting the rising panic and for breath. Maybe there was something in those slingers. Don't puke in my elevator, okay? I was out of witty replies anyway, but at that moment the door opened. Neither of us moved at first, and if it had closed and Colton had pressed L, I wouldn't have objected. We'd have returned to the lobby, I'd have finally made an excuse and left, and my life would have stayed much simpler than it has since become. But then we heard voices. That's Richard, Colton said, and stepped out of the elevator, leaving me little choice but to follow. Any brief hope that disturbing sensations would ease was immediately dashed. If anything, I felt colder still, and my nose twitched at the unmistakable tang of blood. I took a deep breath before shuffling behind Colton down a short, well-lit corridor toward his apartment door, the last one on our left. 3 people stood outside. "What's up, Richard?" Colton greeted a dark-skinned man in a sleigh-grey uniform and peaked cap, who was by far the tallest of the 3. His companions were a pretty bleached blonde who looked my age, and an older, severe-looking woman with shoulder-length brown hair, both dressed in navy blue skirt suits. They all turned to look at us, but while the first 2 focused on Colton, the older woman looked straight at me, and her hazel eyes narrowed. I returned her scrutiny with an edge of defiance. I get that reaction sometimes from those who recognize my Hispanic ancestry and disapprove. "Sup, Mr. Lin," said Richard. "Sorry about this. I know it's irregular, but these ladies wanted access to your apartment." "Why? Are they police? Do they have a warrant?" "I represent building management," said the blonde, holding out a business card. "Nicole, this isn't a legal matter, Mr. Lin. It's a..." She stopped and looked at the other woman, who gave a brisk nod before turning toward Colton. "Have you experienced any discomfort in your apartment recently? Changes in temperature, drafts, things of that nature?" Her accent was British, not in a Downton Abbey way, but she would have sounded right at home in one of those gritty police dramas set in bleak post-industrial towns where it rained all the time. Colton stood up straighter, obviously impressed. I like a British accent as much as the next guy. What I was sensing left me unsettled, and her staring at me hadn't helped. "It's too hot, Mom," he said. Ridiculous. All he needed was a cap to doff. "Consistently? Can he not control the temperature?" "Thermostat doesn't work, even if I turn it all the way down." "I see. And have you tried to fix it?" She turned toward the security guard, who shrugged. "Maintenance came last week, said it was all working normal." "They're wrong," sobbed Colton. "Who are you exactly?" I asked her. "Are you with building management too?" She turned her gaze back on me, and I resisted the urge to flinch, as if caught misbehaving in class. She was a striking woman. Her skin was too pale and lips too thin for my taste, and was clearly much older, but she drew the eye and commanded the attention of those around her. "My name is Rosalind Hill," she said brusquely. "I'm a consultant. You can think of me as a building inspector." She didn't offer me a business card, but I got the impression she wasn't looking for maintenance issues or building code violations. She turned back to Colton. "Mr. Lin, I may be able to help, but I need your permission to enter your apartment. Do you give it?" Sure," Colton said slowly, licking his lips, "but I need to use my bathroom." "Of course, after you." Colton opened the door with his keycard, and the ensuing frigid blast of air almost knocked me over. I took an involuntary step backward toward the elevator, and Rosalind cocked her head as she glanced at me. No one else reacted, simply following Colton inside. "You didn't introduce yourself," she said without moving. "Dee, Colton and I go back a ways." "Dee? Well, Dee, are you up to this?" She sounded concerned and considerate. "You don't need to come inside if you don't want to." "No, I don't want to. I want to be back in my own place, or anywhere other than here. But I don't want to be out in the corridor by myself either." "I'll come in. It's just an apartment." She nodded. "Very well. You should feel better soon." I forced myself to relax and followed her inside, wondering what she meant by that. Did she think I looked high like Colton, or did she see something else? The space was small despite the high ceilings, and tidier than I had expected. A charcoal-colored fabric couch dominated the main living space, facing the wall to our left, upon which hung a flat-screen TV. To the right was a door, presumably leading to the bedroom and bathroom, but it was closed. I wondered if Colton was being sick again, or perhaps hiding evidence of substances he should no longer possess. The neutral white walls held no decorations of any kind, certainly no photographs. Colton's past was as much his own business as my past was mine. "Feels fine to me," Nicole whispered to Rashad, who shrugged and turned toward Rosalind. "What now, Mom?" Her lips twitched as she studied the room, head tilted to one side and nostrils flaring. The door to our right opened and Colton emerged with a guilty glance in my direction. "I need time and some peace and quiet," she said. "You may wait outside or in here, but please do nothing to distract me." "I need to go back to my desk," said Rashad, and Nicole said she'd wait for Rosalind downstairs. "You'll stay with me, won't you, Dean?" Colton pleaded. And I bit my lip and nodded. This room was the heart of it, of everything I could feel. I could barely breathe, much less speak, and the sharp iron taste of blood was making me nauseous. "Sit on the couch and be quiet," Rosalind commanded, and we did. She stood behind us and closed her eyes. We sat in uncomfortable silence, me shivering and sweat beading on Colton's brow. He was clearly experiencing something strange, but in an entirely different way. We watched Rosalind, both awed by this diminutive British woman who had taken charge of the situation, whatever the situation actually was. Colton opened his mouth to speak, but I shook my head, and he subsided. Her lips moved silently, but otherwise there was no sign of what she was doing, or if she was doing anything at all. Suddenly, the room shifted somehow, and the pressure changed, like when your ears pop during an airplane descent. My eyes lost focus and I closed them, which was when I saw the two men, one older and one younger, both dressed in stiff white-collared shirts, dark waistcoats, and suit pants. They faced each other across a huge wooden desk with papers strewn across its surface, in a room of the size of Colton's apartment. I couldn't hear anything, and the scene flickered erratically, like an improperly tuned station on the old analog TV back in my childhood bedroom. But they were arguing, that was clear, eyes wide as they yelled at each other. The older man's white bearded face was bright red as he waved papers in his right hand while stabbing at them with fingers from his left. The other man, sporting the most improbable moustache I'd ever seen, kept shaking his head, then suddenly stopped and took on a look that I knew all too well, the human equivalent of a cornered beast. As soon as the older man turned his back, as if heading for the door, I knew what was going to happen. The younger man picked up a large brass paperweight from his desk, raised it as he strode forward, and the scene dissolved. Before the inevitable blow fell, the image faded as if the tuner had finally given up on the weakening signal. At the same time, all the pressure, the freezing cold, and the other sensations that had threatened to overwhelm me ever since I stepped off the elevator ebbed and disappeared, like a retreating storm surge after the front has passed. I opened my eyes and I was back in Colton's apartment, sprawled on the floor, clutching the short pile carpet, my breathing ragged. Colton stared at me in concern and confusion, standing next to his overturned couch. Rosalind was nowhere to be seen. "What the was that?" I croaked, and broke into a fit of coughing that doubled me over. My throat felt parched, as if I had drunk nothing all day. As the fit passed, a large red plastic tumbler appeared in front of me, and I looked up to find Rosalind holding it. Sweat beaded her brow, and she was panting as if she'd just run a 5K in the Midwestern July heat. "That," she said, as I took grateful gulps of water, "should be the end of your discomfort, Mr. Lynn."
Sickly are having a conversation about the past, and Brian also in this scene. It's two scenes that are kind of broken up by just a quick pause. So he's also reflecting about some things that he did in his past. "I want that bitch out of my house," Mom said. Brian was alone with his mother in her bedroom, Shelby having left to do her night shift at the hospital. He understood why Mom was irate. She looked more than sickly now. She appeared putrid, a woman whose humanity had been stripped from her by drugs and illness. Brian had always struggled to feel empathy, but he could at least understand his mother's suffering. But even if he had been capable of such an emotion, He wouldn't have felt any for the woman who birthed him. If anything, her anguish was mildly amusing. This bitch you hired is killing me, Brian, Mom said. Little by little, she's killing me. Brian took a deep breath. Though he just applied cologne, it did little to mask the foul odor of his mother's body. You're being a bit dramatic. She's a nurse, Mom, not a monster. She's a cunt is what she is, and I want her gone. You know I can't care for you on my own. Horse shit. What you really mean is you won't do it. Mom, don't mom me, you lazy, ungrateful bastard. I want fuckface Nightingale out of my house. Understand? It's Grandpa's house. His mother reddened. Don't give me that shit. I inherited this house. You're lucky I let you live here. You couldn't survive on your own. Oh yeah? Well, maybe I'll just hire my own team of nurses and butlers. People who know how to care for a sick woman. Brian sat in the chair beside her, beside her bed, so his face would be level with hers. You're forgetting that you legally put yourself in my care. I have power of attorney. Well, unless you get rid of Shelby, I'm taking you off that, because if you keep letting her do this, she's clearly not fit to take care of me. With those words, a tremor went through Brian's blood, chilling it. He gripped his kneecaps as if they were a ledge he was dangling from. Perhaps I learned it from watching you, Mommy dearest, he said with a sneer. How fit to take care of me would you say you were? How good of care did you provide me as a child? His mother paled. I gave you a roof and 3 square meals at... No. Grandpa did. He may not have loved me, but he did provide. You, on the other hand, couldn't be bothered. That's not fair. I was sick. No, you were crazy. Her eyes went wide. Brian! That's why Grandpa didn't want you here in this mansion. He tucked us into the guest house like a dirty little secret, hiding us to keep the Gibson name in good standing. He couldn't let his irrational, volatile, promiscuous daughter ruin the family's reputation. His mother swung, trying to slap him across the face, but she was too slow and weak, and Brian moved out to reach easily. How dare you speak to me this way, she said. You don't know what it's like for me. You didn't know what it was like for me back then. Oh? Then who would know better? I was there for it all. All the imaginary bugs, all the manic spells, all the late night boyfriends you brought home from bars. You know, when Dad killed himself, he abandoned me. He left me with an emotionally abusive mother who drank too much and parented it too little. Mom kicked her legs like a child in tantrum. You shit! You don't know what it's like to be me. You don't know what it's like to raise a child alone when you're sick and your husband is dead. Brian leaned in close. Why do you think he did it? His mother punched the mattress but wouldn't answer. Why do you think Dad hung himself? Brian asked. Fuck you, Brian. I believe I know. Would you like me to enlighten you? Fuck you, she screeched. Your father was sick. Let me enlighten you. Suicide ran in your dad's family. His father shot himself. His little sister slit her wrists. His aunt jumped off a bridge into a fucking freezing river. The weight of this new information struck Brian like a baseball bat. He sat back in the chair and gazed out at the window at the dying light of another day. They just kept getting shorter, the darkness strengthening, warning of the coming winter. So what were you gonna say, smart ass? Mom asked. That Camillo hanged himself because I was too unbearable to live with? Huh? Is that the foul shit you were gonna try to feed your mother? Well, fuck you, sonny boy. Fuck you and your stupid opinions. All you do is mope around here all day and piddle with that fucking organ. No job, no wife, no future. What have you done with your life, huh? What mark are you leaving on this world? Brian thought of the headlines he'd clipped from the scrapbook hidden in the wall safe. He'd left his mark, but could never brag about it, even if he wished to. Some son you are, Mom said. Some sorry excuse for a man, too. It's a good thing your father killed himself. I'm glad Camillo's not alive to see what a failure his boy turned out to be. If he weren't already dead, he'd die of shame. Brian swallowed hard as he continued to stare at the weeping willow just outside the window. He knew he should be furious with his mother for her hurtful words, but he only felt numb. It was a force field he'd constructed during childhood, a defense mechanism against the woman's emotional abuse. He started toward the door. "Fire that nurse, Brian," his mother growled. "Fire her or I'm calling my lawyer." Brian paused in the doorway but didn't turn around to face her. How? He didn't have to see his mother to know the look of rage she was displaying. There was no phone in her room, and she was incapable of going downstairs on her own to make a call on the landline. Mom also didn't have a cell phone. She insisted they were radioactive and caused brain cancer and hemorrhages. She didn't even like that Brian had one. As she started screaming more threats, Brian closed the door on the old woman and descended the winding staircase. Once he was sitting at his organ, he started playing Light My Fire by The Doors. Mom had always hated that song. In the security of the bathroom, Brian grazed upon the scrapbook. The old headline shouted with bold print, looking fresh even on the yellowed paper. "The Hooded Devil Strikes Again. Young couple found slain in park." Usually the memories aroused him, but today his mother's harsh words distracted him too much to truly enjoy the nostalgia. This had been one of his favorite homicides. The young couple, whom he later learned were Jason Azaria, 20, and Monica Clark, 18, had been making up Jason's parked car by the softball field after dark. Brian had been young then, young and strong. The car doors had been unlocked, and after sneaking up on the couple, Brian swung the driver's side door open, grabbed Jason by the hair, and stabbed him in the throat 3 times before the lover boy could even register what was happening. As Jason flailed, Brian kept stabbing, sending the enormous blade of the hunting knife into his victim's chest and abdomen. At first, all Monica did was scream, but then she jumped out the passenger side and ran off in only her skirt. Without her shoes, she couldn't run well, and Brian caught up with her easily. He slashed at her bare shoulders before snatching her by the hair, then yanked her head back to expose her throat. He opened it with a deep slice from ear to ear. Blood gushed, covering her small breasts like body paint, and the girl's screams became gargles as she dropped to her knees, clutching at the wound as it bled through her fingers. Jason had called out for his sweetheart then. Surprised the man was still alive, Brian returned to him, and Jason kicked him in the shin before Brian pinned him on his stomach and hacked with crazed abandon. The newspapers would later report that Jason Azaria was stabbed a total of 63 times, not including the grazes and other cuts. Brian didn't rob his victims or swipe any mementos. He didn't rape or molest them or defile their corpses. His only desire had been to kill. It was an insatiable bloodlust he developed after Alice Fuller. Since her murder, Brian had begun stalking and slaying random victims, taking inspiration from slasher movies that had been popular at the time. He'd fashioned a mask out of a red pillowcase, magic marker, and a devil-horned headband from an old Halloween costume. Wearing it with all black clothing had given him an indescribable thrill. He'd felt as if he were in a movie, and when one of his female victims survived his attack and described his appearance to the police, the press dubbed him the Hooded Devil, certifying his stardom. Now in his 50s with a gimp leg, depression, and other undiagnosed health problems, Brian had long since hung up his hood. He'd effectively retired from serial killing before the end of the previous century. The decision to quit came out of a concern for his own safety. One victim had struck him over the head with a baton before Brian could overpower him. Another had pulled his hood off, and Brian had been especially brutal with her to make sure she didn't live to describe him, using a wrench to hammer her face until the skull cracked like a watermelon. One man had caught Brian by surprise, coming home as Brian was choking the man's daughter with her own nylons. If not for his pistol, Brian might not have been able to kill the father fast enough. He'd also grown worried about getting caught. A few close calls had riddled him with anxiety about hunting new victims. Brian was not so much afraid of a death sentence as he was of life in prison. He didn't believe he could handle spending his remaining years in a cage with savage inmates more animal than man. Perhaps more than all of this, Brian had felt it was time to put the Hooded Devil to rest before the demon could devour him whole. But the lust to take young lives remained. Even while he managed to suppress it, the desire to kill continued unabated. Even now, decades after his last murder, Brian still had blood-soaked daydreams. His fantasies always steered back to memories of his time as one of America's most wanted killers. Violent news stories were his pornography, and while he appreciated today's mass murderers, Brian missed the golden age of serial killers. He longed for men like Dahmer, Bundy, Kemper, and Ramirez, and he missed the Hooded Devil. That mass slayer had taken 16 lives across New England in the mid-90s, even though law enforcement only connected 9 of those murders and attributed them to him. Brian flipped through the scrapbook some more, reliving the glory of his youth with a bittersweet smile. Now that he was growing old, he wanted to snatch life from the young more than ever. But even if he dared to unearth the hood from its tackle box in the crawl space, he was too weak to do what he once had. He would fail to perform and would only end up more anxious and unhappy than when he'd begun, or worse. The only way he could successfully stalk and kill would be with a firearm. But he tried that for a short time in his heyday, having stolen one of his grandfather's old war pistols, and found it grossly unsatisfying. It was too easy and impersonal, and now, at least in America, shootings were just too trendy. There could be no resurrecting the hooded devil. That part of Brian's life was over. Growing old meant one had to accept they couldn't always be what they once were. It was a standard clause. Falling into the tar of self-pity, Brian closed the scrapbook in disgust and exited the bathroom. Turning off the overhead fan, he was once again able to hear his mother raving down the hall, screaming demands he ignored as he pondered where to go from here. For once, the old hag was right. He was stagnant, directionless, pointless. Brian Vives needed help. As he returned the scrapbook to the wall safe, the doorbell rang, lifting his spirits. He hadn't realized the time. "You better not let that bitch back in my house!" Mom shrieked from her bedroom. For a man with a cane, Brian descended the stairs quickly. At least he had one thing to look forward to.
What's up, everybody? Well, this is the end of day one for Authorcon, and holy crap, I was like so overwhelmed with like meeting so many authors. Where to even start? I did meet Mr. Christopher Triana, which was awesome. I met John Wayne Communal, Daniel J. Volpe, Aaron Beauregard, Richard Beauchamp, D.W. Hitz, and Jay Bauer, Wiley E. Young, and Wes Southard. All of them were amazing people, and there is no way that you can do this sort of event in one day. So I like the layout for it, and I also did go to 2 live readings. You will see that in the video, but I was like low on battery power, so I didn't really film a panel, because I went to like the weird Western and historical horror panel, which was pretty awesome. So I will come here tomorrow, probably not as long, because the event goes from like 10 to 6, but there's a couple live readings I do want to see, and I still haven't met Ronald Malfi or Clay McLeod Chapman yet, so that's definitely happening tomorrow. And I really did enjoy Christopher Triana's live reading. There was Jay Bauer, Gareth Ian Davies, and Brett Abler, or Abdel. I'll have to look that up. But just needed to film an outro here, and I will have day one uploaded as soon as my phone's charged, because it's getting very low. Good night, everybody. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, because it was amazing, and I never thought that I'd be able to like do something like this. And I got selfies with all the authors that I just mentioned. I'll put them on my Instagram and my Facebook, so I'm probably going to get some exposure here. But I'm going to go ahead and go home and get some sleep. Good night. Peace.